Welcome back, everyone. Our next workshop is presented by Heather McNeil and Ali Rendelli, and it's on leveraging technology for healthcare dissemination. Thanks, Ali and Heather.
Thanks so much for that introduction. So this is going to be our outline. We're going to talk a little bit about what is social media and how technology allows for options for healthcare dissemination within the social media spheres. These were the objectives that had been posted prior for what we hope you'll be able to accomplish by the end of the seminar. So we're just going to do a little bit of introductions about ourselves, kind of give you some background as to why we're going to be discussing this today. So I'll hand it over to Heather.
Okay, lovely to meet you all. And if we understand that, you may be in places that don't have a video or you don't feel comfortable sharing video. So if so, please join us in the conversation in Twitter. If you do feel comfortable though, and you have a working video, we'd really encourage you to turn it on. It just gives us more feedback and it makes the learning that much richer. And we don't want you to feel like just because other people aren't turning your video on, that you can't turn your video on. We really want to encourage that if possible. I just want to highlight two things there. We have some QR codes. So if you probably already have your phone ready to participate with us in Twitter anyhow. So if you do, just open up the camera app and then hover over each of the QR codes. One on the left is a Teaching with Technology certificate course that we're offering. Next round is going to be in September. So if all this stuff really gets you excited, you might be interested in that. We also wanted to show you a YouTube channel that I've created for teaching and learning in synchronous environments, but Ali and I are going to be doing videos on teaching with Twitter as well. And we hope that those are going to come out in late this year, early next year. And I guess the other background is on me is just that I teach a master's course in this and have a role as faculty lead educational technologies. And I'm a physician by background and also a physiotherapist by background. So we were just talking about how it's great to have all this interprofessionality going on.
So a little bit about me. I actually worked in sports journalism for several years before I decided to transition into medicine. And I'm actually a very proud Mac grad, class of 2015 from the MD program. Loved my time at Mac and then went on to do my residency at the University of Toronto in physiatry. During my time there, I completed extra training in health journalism through the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, which has been really, really rewarding during this pandemic. I've been able to write for national newspapers and international publications, radio, different TV opportunities in order to advocate for COVID rehab, which is what I do clinically, as well as general musculoskeletal physiatry rehab and some frail elderly patients. Part of my role through the University of Toronto Physiatry Department is that I run the Twitter page for the entire division. We started it about a year ago, February 2020, and we have close to 500 followers now. We liaise with different groups like the American Academy of Physiatrists, Canadian Academy of Physiatrists, and we're slowly growing it, which is great. I have my personal Twitter account that I use as kind of my own advocacy for rehab, as well as some tutorials on rehab and sharing really interesting rehab articles. And then I host and create an MSK medical education podcast. So I also do all the social media for that. So there's kind of a few different layers to my background as to why I find it a really great intersection between some of my training and what I'm doing clinically. But we're going to get into it a little bit here. So I want you all, we're going to make this interactive to think about where you fit in the social media world. So be it, do you use Twitter as your primary? Are you more into LinkedIn or Instagram? Do you have a YouTube page? Are you a passive observer, someone that logs in and just kind of scrolls through, logs out, doesn't really engage? Are you a participant observer? So you'll like a couple of things, but you're not really adding to the conversation, but you might be engaging a little bit more than just observing? Or are you full and active participant? Are you someone that's asking questions, sharing articles, connecting with the author, going back and forth? So we're going to have you do that through here. So here's some background on how to annotate for those that have not used Zoom before, which might be impossible and this far into the pandemic, but if you can use your screen and fit yourself into one of these categories, or if you straddle the two categories, how are you currently using Twitter? And then you can either put in your Twitter handle if you haven't already added it into the chat box, or you can just put a check mark, whatever you see fit.
And I'm just going to add, for those who haven't done a lot of annotation, how you access this is you're going to go up to the top of your screen. You'll see a green button or a green thing that says you're viewing Ali's screen. And right beside that is a black drop-down menu that says View Options. You're going to click on that View Options, and about the fourth one down, it's going to say Annotate. You'll click on Annotate, and then an annotation bar is going to pop up. That's going to allow you, if you hit text, you can type. If you want to just put a stamp, like you want to put a check mark, you could put a check mark on one of these columns. You could even draw if you want. So play around with that annotation if you haven't done so before.
So it seems like a lot of people are on Twitter and using social media, and they're getting information but not necessarily engaging. So more of the passive observers. And someone is straddling between passive observer and contributing. And there's a few that are contributing daily or weekly. And so the goal is to provide some ways that we can help you move into the active contributor and in whatever time frame works with your schedule. And so we know adding something new into your weekly time commitments can be quite hard, but we want to kind of give you that confidence that you don't need to create a perfect tweet in order to start tweeting or to add a post. And hopefully you'll be able to use some of what we're saying to engage further after this session. So that was more how you're using it. How often are you guys tweeting if you are using Twitter as your platform, or whichever platform you decide to use? Event only is a great option, especially for a conference like this where there's a hashtag where you can follow the conversation. It's really useful to pick up clinical pearls and tips that you didn't necessarily get a chance to hear on your own if you weren't part of that event. Right now, you had to make the choice to attend our workshop, and we're very grateful for that, but at the expense of not attending another one. And so following the hashtag during events is huge. Other people are using it monthly, someone weekly, someone daily. Yeah, so there's tons of ways that you can do this. And if you're not really sure how to start using it, one thing you can do is think about adding it into your weekly events. So if you're someone who uses it monthly and you're kind of just checking in and you want to learn how to engage a little bit more, maybe you put in an hour every Monday morning and you kind of log in, see what's happening, engage with a few people, and make that leap to increasing it without the overwhelming concern of being overwhelmed with how much you could do on the app. All right, so I'm going to move on here. So let's get tweeting. So I had this post come out just as we were starting around 2 p.m. I just gave a little bit of introduction of who I am and our hashtag. So if you do have any questions, you can engage with us through this tweet, but it'd be great to get to know you guys and really think about your purpose of being on this webinar today. So how you introduce yourself through Twitter and how you're using this to show your professional identity is very important. So these are the things that I wanted to highlight of who I am as a physiatrist, as a physician, what I do from a medical education perspective, and what I'm doing as part of this conference. But when you're thinking about starting to use social media more, part of it is also what is your goal? And what part of that is also who's your brand and what is your academic brand that you're trying to convey to people. So through this, I am an MSK physiatrist. I think I updated this to say that I'm also a COVID rehab physiatrist. These are things that if people come across and they're like, oh yeah, had a COVID rehab question for one of my patients that left acute care, that I might be someone they think about and reach out to because I'm branding myself as someone who can do that within this new world of COVID. I host a medical education podcast, so maybe someone will want to connect and collaborate and have me on their medical education podcast as an MSK expert. And so these are the things that you want to highlight when you're showing the world kind of who you are from an academic perspective. So let's take a step back. What is Twitter? And so we know that it fits within the social media networking world, and there's lots of different options for what that means. Twitter is the only one that falls under the microblogging sphere. So it started off with 140 characters per tweet, is now up to 280, as you know, and can thread tweets together. So you can actually be more comprehensive than when Twitter first launched several years ago. And I will say that when I started working at TSN back in 2010, it was mandated for me at that time to get Twitter. So I've been using it for more than a decade now, and it's changed quite a bit. And through that, it's no longer considered as microblogging, but it is kind of, when you think about it, compared to other platforms. With that, you can use a combination of videos, words, pictures, and links, compared to something like a video sharing site like YouTube, which has to be video based, or something like Instagram, which has to be picture based. So depending on what your goal is, you can think of what might be best for you and then how to use those to kind of link together. So when you post on Facebook, for example, you can also post on Instagram and vice versa. Are there ways that you can capitalize your time to use multi-platforms to expand your reach? There's many uses of Twitter. So microblogging, as we talked about, was its original kind of tool. So here's what I'm eating for breakfast, and a picture of your cool smoothie. Started out with sharing, so linking to articles, connecting with other individuals, bringing like-minded people together from different parts of the world. Conferences, as we talked about, initially it was rare to kind of have a conference hashtag. And what I loved about this conference, if Dr. Chan is still on the line, is that we were actually encouraged to create our own tweet when we were putting in our submissions. And that way you can be part of the reach in order to get people drawn into what you want them to accomplish with joining the workshop, by being the content expert for your own workshop. And I thought that was really a brilliant idea. So not only a conference hashtag, but getting us to pre-write tweets to add to the appeal. Journal clubs is a big one. There's some journal clubs that only exist online, which is very interesting, versus using it as a component to people that are still meeting physically or now somewhat online as well. And then news and trends. It's essentially a curated news source of things that you have decided are interesting to you. But what I like is you click on one person who posted a very interesting article, and then you start looking at their followers and the things that they posted, and it can expand your network just by following people that are posting things that you enjoy. There's many ways that you should be engaging with Twitter. So the passive observers are mainly just reading, and that's great. You can pick up a lot of wonderful information. I've probably read more journal articles in the last year or two by expanding my medical education and academic Twitter portfolio and who I follow, because I'm not someone who generally picks up new journals for multiple different specialties every month to kind of stay up to date. But when I see someone post being like, I released this new journal article, and then I click directly on it, it's such a great way to stay up to date on topics that are interesting to you. Responding to individuals is a way to further the conversation. So if Heather posts some new research that she's doing, and then I have a question about it, oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about why you made this decision? You can actually engage with authors of research that you may never have had the opportunity to do prior. And people are really responsive on Twitter. If they're spending time posting, they want to engage. They have spent so long working on this research, they want to engage with you. So having that back and forth. And then there's recirculating. So retweeting, either just by circulating it back to the people that follow you by pressing retweet, versus quote tweeting. So adding in your own conversation. I have a couple examples coming up. But I find quote tweeting is one of the best ways to engage with your audience, because you're saying, I read this very interesting new piece of news or literature or article that came out, and this was the high level summary that I'm taking away, or this is why I thought it was interesting, or posing a question back to the larger group. What questions do you have once you read this? Let's talk about it. And so I think thinking about where you're at with each layer And that might change from time to time. You might be super busy one week and you really only have time to kind of read through, versus other times you might be more open to engaging and responding because you have more time in your schedule. And those ebbs and flows will be natural. So this is an example of what I was talking about. So the different arrows on the left are the things that you can do to engage with a tweet. So this is one of Heather's tweets. On the far left, the little chalk symbol is responding to it. So I've put that as an example on the right to Courtney Reed. I've responded to her tweet, and it shows up kind of as the next layer down. And then all the responses will be in a list further down, and you can see everyone who responded to it. On the second from the left, the arrows intertwine together. That's retweeting, and retweeting with a quote. So that's on the bottom portion on the right. So Harvard Macy started talking about this conference and I followed them. So then I further expanded that conversation by quote tweeting. And so adding in my own commentary to what was already happening in the dialogue. And so there's different ways depending on how you want to engage. And I think it's important to figure out what's going to work for you. The more comfortable you feel being a content expert in your area, in your field, the more quote tweeting kind of adds another layer of explanation versus kind of commenting or responding to someone is you're having that dialogue between each other. And then the heart is to like it, and then there's other ways to share it. We don't have time to get into this, but for those that are interested in learning more about how and why social media is important, this is a wonderful brand Rants talk that was recorded several years ago now by a doctor in the States who's been very big on social media. And so I'd recommend watching this if you have further interest. But these are some of the key takeaways from that. Sort of when you're thinking about using social media, are you facilitating knowledge exchange? Are you using it to talk to an expert, as I mentioned, liaising with someone who's done a study and you have further questions? Are you developing scholarly work? So I met Teresa Chan by engaging with her on Twitter, and she's been so lovely as a mentor to me now, and collaborating in different ways together, really by meeting on Twitter. It really can have a very wide-ranging reach. Sharing resources and clinical pearls. I put often patient education handouts and things on Twitter, and then people give feedback, and I continue to expand what I share to my patients through this, and amplifying your career. So as I mentioned, meeting mentors, being asked to speak on topics because someone identifies you as someone who's an expert in a specific topic can amplify your career through social media. And so in 2010, social media was the new way to communicate. And now social media is your telephone. So while we are all very busy, it's really important to think about this not as an afterthought, but really something that's important to where we're at in 2021. And this was from several years ago now, but Jason Frank from the Royal College said, within the next decade, you won't be able to be a successful scholar without having some activity on social media. And that was before journals were asking for your Twitter handle to associate you with the release of a new publication. And so you really should be thinking of it of the lens of how is it going to enhance your career moving forward? Who do you want to connect with? What are you trying to share with individuals who are following you as a content expert? And there have been some really good studies that have been done that show that tweeted articles do have a bigger reach and more citations than non-tweeted ones. And I know that a lot of work is going into further meta-analysis and other studies on what the reach and scope is of social media, but it does have benefit in order to further enhance the work that you're already doing kind of within your institution or within your field of work. Before I hand it over to Heather, I do just want to say, being mindful of what you do put on Twitter. So my rule of thumb is think twice, tweet once. It will always be part of your digital footprint, even if you delete it. So keeping your professional hat on at all times is an absolute must as you move through social media. And we can get to that a bit further as we go in this talk.
Okay, so we just heard about Twitter, which is, kind of the quintessential social media to connect and share and collaborate all together. But there's lots of other social media that we can use too that we shouldn't forget about. One of them would be having a website. So I'd like you to annotate again. Why would you want to build a website? And if you have a website of your own, or there's a website that you find is really helpful to you, post that URL. We'd love to see that as well. So just to remind you how to annotate, you're going to go up to the top of your screen to the black button that says View Options, and you're going to scroll down to Annotate. You'll see an annotation bar, and I'd suggest that you hit the text icon so that you can type in, why would you want to build a website? What uses could you see using a website for in your academic work? So I have an example there as curation. So you might, for instance, you might be teaching and you want to post a whole bunch of resources for your students. And instead of, sending them all over the internet to look up things, you can have it all in one place. So recruit new students. Yeah, that's great. So, if you have your website and, one of your students has your website, and you could say, hey, if you have anyone else interested in coming and doing a rotation for me, here's what the rotation is going to look like. Here's a little bit about me. If it's a good fit, tell them to contact me. Having control over format. I'm not sure who wrote that, but if you feel comfortable, could you open up your mic and let us know, what do you mean having control over format? Post your med-ed portfolio. Yeah. So a little personal website to show everybody your stuff. We always joke that we have to go halfway around the world to learn what our colleagues are doing. Well, why not have it on a website that you can share? If you create chat talks, you can host on your own website. Yeah, perfect. So you've got a resident with you and it's a really busy day and you want to give them some background learning before you both go in and see a patient together. You have a website with your curated material. Maybe you've created a chat talk video there. You send them off and then you go in and see the patient together. Yeah, so fantastic. Okay, so lots of different website builders that you can choose from. And I can tell you in our master's course and our certificate course, there is a bit of a learning curve, but people are always surprised at how easy it is to make, especially with a lot of these out-of-the-box ones like Wix. Now, remember that the easier they are to use, the less bells and whistles they have. So Wix would be a little bit easier. Something like WordPress, a little bit steeper of a learning curve, but a lot more bells and whistles to play around with. So this is an example of Wix. So this is what I've used for curation. When people come on rotation with me, we have all these topics, so I don't have to keep emailing them all the information. Now this is still under construction, so you can see not all the topics are filled out yet. I've got a little link to a neurological exam. I've got some orientation documents there, and I've tried to also have it collaborative. So if there's a student who wants to take one of these blocks ahead on top here and create one of the education topics, that's fantastic, and it's great for their learning too. This is another example of curation for a lecture that I used to give. So in there, I can post my lecture, which is in a PowerPoint. I can also post a whole bunch of links and resources and some other references. So this one is built out in WordPress. You can see the look and feel is a little bit different. There's a lot of parent and child links. And then the last one I wanted to show you, this is what we're using in our Teaching with Technology course. So this is built in Google Sites. So again, different look and feel, pretty easy to use, a little bit more modular. Just some other ones to highlight. I'm not sure if Teresa's still here, but love their metrics website that is a great way for both collaboration and curation. So you can see how they've chunked all of their research. You have all the collaborators there, and then their research agenda that they've built on that has all of the resources if you want to follow along or look up anything. Okay, we're just going to have a little fun here. So we're going to do some trivia. So we want you to type your answers in chat and follow along with us. So we're going to talk about video. We just talked about Twitter, then we talked about websites. Now we're going to talk about videos. Why would you build a video? So fill in the blanks in the chat for us. What is the second most popular website after Google? So fill in the chat, what is the second most popular website after Google? Yeah, YouTube coming in. Perfect. Yeah. So 65% of people used YouTube to help them solve a problem. So this one, we want you to type in chat X% where the X is and Y% where the Y is. So the question is, viewers retained X% of a message when they watch it in video compared to Y when reading it in text. Now, I'm just going to put in a caveat that these are not, randomly controlled trials. And, we've taken these stats off of fairly reputable websites, mostly business websites. So take it with a grain of salt. But it still, really brings home the point of why video is so important in our social media. And Ali always talks about, when you put video into your Twitter, how much more powerful that makes your message. Okay, so we're getting 30 to 10, 40 to 15. According to this one site, viewers retained 95% of a message when they watched it in a video versus 10% when reading it in text. Probably part of that is Mayer's principle, which is dual channel learning. So when you're learning things by visual and by auditory, you're going to take in a lot more information. Okay, here's another really important thing about video, because video is really powerful, but only for a short segment of time. We all know when we're watching YouTube that if the video is long, we're probably not going to persist with it. Very different than if we're sitting in a classroom listening to somebody, we can usually persist with listening to someone longer. So 1/3 of viewers will stop watching a video after how many seconds? Put that as X. 45% by Y minutes and 60% by Z minutes. So give a guess at that. You guys are doing a fantastic job of participating along with us.
I will say that tweets with images and tweets with video links tend to get, on average, at least 25% more engagement, if not more. So you'll notice that journals will tend to use infographics now, or a short visual of what the article is or the research is representing, because people might not read through all 11 pages of the article that was written, and they'll look at just the slide summary. So that's really important when you are tweeting. If there is a visual component to it, your engagement will be higher.
Yeah, so this is really to say, if you're going to make a video, keep it under 2 minutes. Easier said than done. And if the content is really important to the learner, you can usually do a little bit more than 2 minutes, but it's that punchy, powerful, engaging 2 minutes. Okay, so if you put a video on your website, on the landing page, you can boost your conversion rate by, 80%. Yeah, so a lot of people putting C, yep, very close, yeah. So lots of video creators out there for you to use. And again, steep learning curve at the beginning, but once you get used to one, it's really easy to start putting out number 2 and number 3. Lots of different ones. VideoScribe is kind of the whiteboard animation. Animoto is more putting slides, moving slides with audio over top. Biteable, Animaker, I've seen those more in my experience a little bit more recently. Beyond, which used to be Go Animate, used to be one of the leaders, and their price point went up a lot, and so a little less so from what I've seen lately. Powtoon's really fun, very cartoonish. And Camtasia, you do have to pay, but they have I think it's a 30-day free trial membership. So a lot of these will have a trial membership that you can try them out before you pay for the price point. Yeah, so I want you to post in chat, what software have you used before? And if you've created a video, please post your URL. We all want to see what videos you've created. I think we all feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. But once you do it and you post it, and then you post again, and your videos just keep getting better and better. Any better for Windows versus Mac? That's a really good question. I find they're all kind of they're all going to have bells and whistles differently. Like even in Camtasia, Windows will do certain things and Mac will do certain things. So I usually use Windows, and every once in a while I'm like, oh, I wish I had a Mac because I want to use that feature, but vice versa, right? So it's really about playing around with it. I wouldn't say any is better or not better. It's just they have different bells and whistles for what you're looking for. So I just wanted to do one more, which is I wanted to post a video that we use. So when we talk about, we just talked about why you would use a website. Well, why would we use a video? We talk about that it increases engagement. It's punchy, but it does have to be quite limited, right? So I do want to give credit to Morag Patton and David Wilger, who did this presentation with me at SACNY just recently, and we had to present some work in progress. Well, you guys know what that's like. You're stuck with some data that's not full and it's not all that interesting, and you're like, how do we convey our excitement and get the conversation going with this bit of data that we don't even know at this point whether it means that much? So we decided to portray it in video using a spoof on a movie trailer. So when people say to me, yeah, but in these online environments, we can't get that emotionality, that emotional connection, I kind of go, well, what about videos? We all love watching movies, and having audio also reflect that. Okay, so here we go. This is our presentation, looking at a conference presentation on some work in progress.
What you've just seen is essentially what we're encountering now. We've been teaching in the same formats in CPD for decades: face-to-face plenaries, workshops, poster sessions, didactic lectures with Q&A. However, over the past year, we've had to quickly learn how to teach and learn in new environments with very little training or experience. So it's no wonder that we feel exhausted or overwhelmed at times, or
Okay, so I'm sure you guys don't want to see the full 10 minutes of it, but that's just an example of how you can use video. Thanks, Ruth. That's just an example of how you can use video to engage your learners in a short, punchy way, or get the conversation going.
So we did whirl through that quite quickly, and we have a lot more to discuss if you're curious on how to kind of get your hand into Twitter or into making a website. If you feel really stuck, that it all seems very overwhelming, we want to talk about all the kind of positives that come out of that. But some of the takeaways are also that there is no perfect tweet. There is no perfect website. These things evolve over time. And as you get more comfortable with yourself, with your audience, and with the medium, what it can do, what it can't do, and kind of talk to people over time, you really start to find your own niche. And so it's not about being someone else or recreating their Twitter presence, their Instagram photos, their website. It's about finding your voice. And so everyone on here today is some sort of content expert in their own way. So you are a therapist, you are a nurse, you are a physician, and then you have subspecialized training in whatever your field is. And so while you seem like you might be junior when you compare yourself to someone else, or I feel junior compared to Heather or Teresa, I'm still within my own niche, content expert, and more senior than a medical student or a resident, and they're more senior than someone else who hasn't done anything in their field. So there is no perfect place to start. You kind of just got to jump in and give yourself that permission to give it a go. As I said, be aware that there is always a digital footprint. So give yourself the headline test. Would this, if this was on the scroll of CP24 or on the news scroll, could you stand by that? If the answer is yes, then go for it. Someone can disagree with it, and that's okay. That creates the discussion, that creates the conversation, that helps you grow, helps them grow. And so it's not about perfection, it's about starting. And I really hope everyone walks away feeling a bit more confident to move forward on social media, and learned a lot more about why it's important to use as a tool to get the information out there that you get to use each day with your patients and your individuals, and you can broaden the scope.
I'd love to hear in the last 30 seconds, I know we didn't get a lot of conversation going, so I would love to hear from anyone here, what's one thing you learned from this session? Just really good feedback for us.
Well, people are thinking, Sunil asked if there's any good platforms to use to build videos with soundtracks. I do everything on iMovie, and I'm pretty basic, I would say. It's really easy to just add and drop things in and have different layers. So if you're on a Mac, it's very intuitive and meshes with your other devices. Yeah, iMovie, very easy.
And I'd say if you're on Windows, the go-to, the industry or what most people use is Audacity. It has a little bit of a steeper learning curve, but there's such a huge community that there's lots of how-to videos out there. Most of the out-of-the-box video creation software have their own built-in audio building, some better than others. And I would really say what's really most important, even more so than the software, is just making sure that you get yourself a really good mic. Having something like this is a great start. And if you can afford a Blue Yeti, we actually had on our master's course, we had someone go out and buy the Blue Yeti. And the next class he was using it. And we were like, is everybody else's microphone that bad that his just sounds, or like, does he just sound amazing today? Like, it can make and we all know when we're watching a video, you can have really crappy visuals and persist with that video. But if you have really crappy audio, it doesn't matter how amazing the visuals are, you're probably moving on. So the audio quality is the most important when you're building your video.
There's one final question. If Ali or Heather, you want to weigh in, how do we pay for the sustainability of these education and assessment tools in the making? And this is posted by VW, who prefaced it by saying, get your roller skates on, as innovation and technology will constantly be evolving and constant learning to keep up with the changes. So sustainability, thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. Because first of all, there's the financial piece. Right? Whenever we build a video, usually we're paying, if we want to buy the software, we're paying for it out of our own pocket. And then we just get used to using it, and then the software changes. And we're like, oh no, I just spent all that time getting to know it. I would say find one you like. They usually, if it does change, it's usually for the better. And in terms of finding ones, a lot of people in our master's course or our certificate course, they will go and spend the extra to get the yearly subscription or whatever. But I have a golden rule that I don't pay for anything. So you can do it free. It sometimes takes a little bit more time because you might have to use the beta versions before they become popular, or you might have to use parts of it without certain bells and whistles and build those in from other free ones in the background. You can do it for free, or you can pay a little bit. But yeah, really good question. Things are always going to continually evolve. Ali, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I was thinking of this from a different lens. It's when we're starting all these, use them and repurpose them in different ways from a sustainability standpoint as well. That's why the websites, that's why social media is great. You can direct people to your tweetorial. If you've taken the time to put together 15 tweets, that takes a long time to explain a topic. Use that as a learning resource for your learners, for other people, connect with them, and then have it repurposed in different ways. So when I was thinking of sustainability like that, because it does take a lot of time to engage, the way that putting PowerPoints together initially took hours to curate the content. It's really important that we create good, free educational materials that we can then continue to build on. Feel free to tweet at us if anything comes up. We'll definitely engage with you. And thank you for interacting with us today.